Did you know that, in 19th-century New England, many believed the dead could harm the living, not as ghosts but as something far more sinister? Families feared that a deceased relative could drain the life from survivors, causing a mysterious wasting illness. This wasn't superstition for its own sake, it was a desperate attempt to explain an invisible killer devastating their communities. The so-called New England vampires weren't monsters, but a symbol of people's struggle to survive. Unlike the Gothic tales of Europe, this fear gripped quiet towns in Rhode Island, Connecticut, Vermont, and Massachusetts. Newspapers reported these events as public crises, not secret superstitions. Farmers, blacksmiths, and churchgoers united in terror, seeking answers and solutions. The vampire panic reveals how people, facing the unknown, blend folk traditions with emerging science to regain control. Without germ theory, the pattern seemed obvious. One family member dies, then another falls ill. Surely the dead are to blame. This belief gave them a villain, an explanation, and a way to act in a world that felt uncontrollable. To understand this history, we must see through their eyes, grappling with fear, not fantasy. Forget capes and fangs. New England's vampires were your own kin, recently buried, never leaving their coffins. These vampires didn't stalk the night. They were believed to drain life from relatives while lying in the grave. Victims wasted away, coughing blood, with no bite marks, just a slow, relentless decline. This myth merged old European beliefs about the restless dead with the harsh reality of a deadly disease. The tragedy families had to confront the bodies of loved ones, hoping to save the living. The threat was intimate. A chain of death within a single bloodline, not a monster terrorizing the village. The horror was personal, believing the person you mourned was now the cause of your child's illness. The response wasn't a monster hunt, but a somber public ritual at the cemetery. Communities searched for physical signs in the corpse, proof the body was not at rest. These acts were desperate attempts at public health, not superstition. The real culprit behind the vampire panic was tuberculosis, then called consumption. Its symptoms were slow and terrifying: cough, fever, night sweats, weight loss, and blood. TB spread easily in crowded homes, but its slow progression made it seem like a curse moving through families. Without knowledge of germs, people saw a pattern: one death, then another, always within the same household. The victim's ghostly appearance and bloody coughs fed the vampire legend. Survivors, already infected, would fall ill soon after a relative's death, seeming to confirm the supernatural link. Exhumed bodies often looked unnaturally preserved due to natural decomposition, bloated, with dark fluids at the mouth. To the untrained eye, these signs were proof of vampirism. The belief was reinforced by what people saw and desperately needed to explain. The vampire myth was a way to make sense of a disease that science couldn't yet understand. In their eyes, the dead were still feeding on the living. When a vampire was suspected, communities followed a grim, methodical ritual. Men, often family and sometimes a doctor, would exhume the first victim of consumption. The body was inspected for signs of undeath, especially liquid blood in the heart. If the corpse was decomposed, it was reburied. If not, it was blamed for the ongoing deaths. The heart and sometimes other organs were removed and burned, symbolizing the destruction of the vampire's power. Fire was seen as purifying, severing the link between dead and living. In extreme cases, ashes from the burned heart were mixed into a drink for the sick, an act of sympathetic magic. This gruesome remedy was a last, desperate hope for a cure. These rituals were not random violence, but a community's attempt to save itself. They reveal the lengths people will go when faced with relentless, unexplained loss. The vampire rituals were a striking mix of ancient folklore and new scientific thinking. Old beliefs about the unquiet dead and the power of fire resurfaced in a time of crisis. Yet, the rituals were carried out with a clinical, investigative approach, sometimes with doctors present. Communities sought physical evidence like blood in the heart to confirm their suspicions. The famous Mercy Brown case in 1892 shows this blend. A doctor performed the autopsy, but the family saw the results as proof of vampirism. The same evidence was interpreted through both scientific and supernatural lenses. People weren't rejecting science, they were trying to integrate it with tradition. The panic was a product of a society in transition, using every tool available to fight an unknown threat. These acts weren't a step backward, but a sign of people grappling with uncertainty. They reveal a community caught between old certainties and new, incomplete knowledge. The New England vampire panic wasn't wild hysteria, it was a methodical, communal response. Exhumations happened only after careful deliberation and community consensus, not impulsive mob action. Local authorities often sanctioned the rituals, and events were public, not secret. The afflicted family was supported, not shamed by neighbors and leaders. The case of Frederick Ransom in Vermont shows this order. The family sought official permission to exhume and burn the heart. These actions were seen as rational and justifiable within their social framework. Communities developed procedures to test their theories and enact a cure. Their premise was wrong, but their process was logical, rooted in observation and a need to act. The panic was about problem solving, not blind fear. It was a desperate, organized attempt to protect families from an unstoppable disease. These people weren't ignorant, they were doing their best with what they knew. The real story is one of resilience and communal action in the face of terror. Community leaders, clergy and doctors had complex roles in the vampire panic. Many clergymen stayed silent, understanding the desperation of their congregations. Doctors, unable to cure consumption, sometimes participated in exhumations, lending medical authority to the rituals. Some did so to comfort families or out of scientific curiosity, knowing they had no better solution. Critics, like Thoreau and some ministers, condemned the practice as superstition, urging trust in science and faith. But their authority was limited. Neither sermons nor medicine could stop the dying. In this vacuum, folk tradition remained powerful. People turned to vampire rituals not out of ignorance but because official answers failed them. The panic was a response to the limits of both science and faith. The vampire panic wasn't a failure of reason, it was a product of incomplete science and weak institutions. With no germ theory or public health system, families faced the epidemic alone, relying on observation and tradition. The vampire belief offered a clear villain, a mechanism, and a solution, far more satisfying than chaos. When science and faith couldn't explain or cure the disease, folklore filled the gap. The rituals gave people agency and hope in a powerless situation. This turn to old beliefs is natural when trusted systems can't provide answers. The panic was a logical response to an information vacuum, not a rejection of progress. People will always seek explanations and control when official narratives fall short. The lesson: in the absence of clear guidance, fear and tradition shape our actions. The New England vampire panic may seem distant, but its lessons echo today. Societies still struggle with invisible threats, mysterious illnesses, misinformation and fear. In uncertainty, people search for patterns, villains, and alternative explanations, just as they did in the past. The need for agency and a clear narrative is timeless. The vampire panic teaches empathy. These communities weren't ignorant, but desperate, using the best tools they had. When modern crises spark unconventional beliefs, it signals that people's fears aren't being addressed by trusted institutions. The story is more than a spooky tale, it's a case study in fear, knowledge, and survival. The line between rational and irrational is drawn by the information available at the time. Clear, compassionate communication is vital in any crisis. By understanding the past, we better understand our own responses to the unknown.